You're listening to Overhead Story Channel. Enjoy.
It started the way a lot of things do, quiet, ordinary, and almost too easy to overlook. That Sunday morning was one of those rare times when everything in the world felt still. You know, the kind where the sun filters through the blinds just right, the coffee tastes better than usual, and there's nowhere urgent to be. Madison and I had been invited to brunch at Shelby's place, which had kind of become a tradition in the last couple years. Shelby's one of Madison's closest friends, and over time, by default or proximity, she'd sort of become one of mine too. Not close, but enough that I didn't feel out of place in her kitchen or awkward helping set the table. I remember Madison seemed off that morning. It wasn't anything huge, just little things. She got dressed quickly but kept changing tops, spent more time than usual on her makeup, then got irritated when I asked if she was okay. "I'm just tired," she said, brushing past me in the hallway. Not unusual for a Sunday, I figured. I didn't press. We got to Shelby's place around 11. Her house sits on the corner lot with this wraparound porch and a yard that smells like lemon balm and rosemary. Inside, it was the usual setup: fruit salad no one touched, a pot of overbrewed coffee, and Spotify playing indie covers of 90s pop songs. Shelby was buzzing around the kitchen with that effortless hostess energy she has, and Madison fell right into the rhythm, talking and laughing like she'd flipped a switch. About 20 minutes in, Shelby walked over to me, gave me this quick smile, and asked if I could step outside for a moment. "Just for a sec," she said. "I want to ask you something about the door frame." It was random, but I didn't think much of it. Shelby's always had a DIY project going on, and I figured maybe she needed a guy's opinion, whatever that even meant. I nodded, grabbed my coffee, and headed out to the porch. I stood there alone, leaning on the railing, listening to birds and distant traffic. 1 minute passed. 2. I waited, staring at the yard, kind of zoning out. The longer I stood there, the weirder it felt. Why ask me out here and then disappear? Then the door creaked open behind me. But it wasn't Shelby. It was Madison. She stepped out, phone in hand, her expression instantly unraveling when she saw me. I'll never forget the way she froze, not just startled, but like she'd been caught doing something she shouldn't have. Her mouth opened slightly like she was about to speak, but nothing came out. Her whole face dropped. She wasn't expecting me to still be there. That was obvious. And for a split second, I swear to God, I saw guilt flash across her face. Not annoyance, not surprise, guilt. She turned on her heel before I could say a word and went right back inside, the screen door snapping shut behind her. No explanation. No smile. Nothing. I stood there, holding my coffee like it was going to offer some answers. A minute later, Shelby finally came out, all casual, holding a screwdriver and pretending she'd really just forgotten what she came out for. "Oh, I got distracted," she said with a laugh. "I was going to show you the loose hinge on the screen." I nodded. Didn't press. I was already thinking about Madison's face. When we got back inside, Madison was sitting at the table like nothing had happened, laughing at something Shelby had said, acting like the last 60 seconds hadn't meant anything. And maybe to her, they didn't. Maybe she thought I wouldn't notice. Or maybe she knew I would and just didn't care. Still, I told myself not to jump to conclusions. It wasn't like she came outside with another man. There was no lipstick on her collar, no suspicious text lighting up her screen. It was just weird. But the feeling in my chest wouldn't go away. Later that afternoon, as we were cleaning up and saying our goodbyes, I casually asked Madison what that moment on the porch had been about. "What moment?" she said. I told her I saw her come out. She blinked, tilted her head a bit like she was trying to recall something. "Oh," she said after a second too long, "I thought Shelby wanted to talk to me out there. She called my name from the porch," I thought. But I must have misheard. That was it. That was the excuse. A misheard call from the porch. And yet, even as she said it, her voice had that practiced calm. Not nervous, not stammering. Just smooth. But I know Madison. I've known her since college. I've seen her lie to her boss about being stuck in traffic when she just overslept. I've seen her lie to customer service agents for better refunds. I know her tells. And that was a lie. Maybe it was a small one. But it was a lie. The kind of lie you only tell when the truth costs more than it should. Still, I let it go. Or at least I tried to. On the drive home, I kept rewinding that moment in my head. The look on her face. The shift in her tone. The fact that she didn't say anything when she first saw me. Not hey, not oh, you're still out here? Just silence and a full retreat. She had the chance to be honest and chose to be vague instead. That night, we didn't talk about it again. We made dinner a chicken and rice. Watched half an episode of something on Netflix. She scrolled on her phone. I pretended to be interested in the show. But I felt it. The weight. The little splinter in my chest that I couldn't dig out. It was like I had stumbled on the first loose thread in a sweater. Not a tear, not yet. Just one loop that didn't look quite right. But once you notice it, you can't unsee it. And if you keep pulling, sooner or later, the whole thing starts to unravel. So no, it wasn't a smoking G*N. It wasn't a screaming match or a caught-in-the-act scenario. But that moment, that single interaction, was the beginning of something. I didn't know it then. But I know it now. It was the first time I saw her retreat from me, not in anger, not in exhaustion, but in fear. And that fear? That was never meant for someone who had nothing to hide. After that Sunday at Shelby's, I kept trying to convince myself that it was nothing. Just a weird moment. Just a misunderstanding. But once the doubt was there, once that seed had been planted, I started noticing things I hadn't before. Or maybe things I had seen all along but brushed aside because I didn't want to admit what they might mean. It wasn't one big thing. That's the part people don't tell you. It's not one thunderbolt that wakes you up, it's 1,000 tiny details that start lining up into something you can't ignore. I remember the first time I really saw it, not just looked at it, but saw it. Madison on the couch, staring at her phone with this look on her face I didn't recognize. Not laughing, not smiling. Just present. Fully absorbed like nothing else in the room mattered, including me. I said her name twice and she didn't hear me. When she finally looked up, it was like I'd interrupted her in the middle of something in asterisk mate. Her eyes were wide, caught, but not embarrassed. Just momentarily annoyed. That used to be my look. The one she gave me. She said she was just reading the news. I believed her. Or maybe I didn't, but I acted like I did because that was easier. Then there were the late nights. She started staying later at work. At first, it made sense. She's always been driven, always cared about her career. But the way she said it started to change. It went from "we've got a deadline" to "it's just easier to stay than come home and go back." And that phrasing stuck with me, easier than coming home. As if home had somehow become inconvenient. She'd get in around 9, sometimes 10, always apologizing but never really sounding sorry. I'd try to ask how her day was, but the answers were thin. One-word summaries followed by silence. Her energy used to spike when she walked through the door. Now she just floated past me like a shadow heading for the shower. And the phone god, the phone. It became a permanent extension of her. Not just constant texting, but guarded texting. Holding it close, screen facing down. Getting up from the couch to take quick calls in another room. Taking it into the bathroom even when she showered. When I pointed it out once, half joking, she laughed and said, "You think I'm running a secret life or something?" I didn't say anything. Because maybe I did. I started remembering other things. Weird things. Like how she'd stopped wearing her wedding ring sometimes. That really hit me. One night, we were at dinner with a couple we'd known for years. As she reached for her wine glass, I saw her bare hand, no ring. I asked her about it on the way home. She said she'd left it on the sink. "I don't always like to wear it when I'm cooking," she said. She hadn't been cooking that night. Then I noticed the second Instagram account. She used it more than the main one, posting filtered pictures, mostly solo **TS. Always cropped just right, always with captions that read more like inside jokes with strangers. And in those photos, she never wore the ring. Not once. I scrolled back through dozens of pictures, smiling at coffee shops, lounging by the pool, pretending to be spontaneous in curated selfies, and the ring was never there. And then there was yoga. Madison loved yoga. At least, that's what I used to think. She talked about it like a religion, said it helped her clear her mind and feel centered. She kept her mat rolled up by the front door, like a reminder of who she was or who she wanted to be. But I hadn't seen her use it in months. Yet every Tuesday and Thursday, she'd grab that same mat, toss it in her car, and head out. I asked once if she was still going to the same studio. She nodded, said she liked the new instructor. I don't even know why I asked. Maybe I was hoping she'd slip. Maybe I was hoping she'd confess something. But she didn't. She smiled, kissed me on the cheek, and left smelling like perfume she didn't use to wear. I started checking the mat after she came home. It was always clean. No sweat, no chalky grip from use. It didn't even look unrolled. I knew what that meant. I just wasn't ready to admit it. One night, I got home early and found her sitting in the kitchen, laughing on a call. She didn't hear me come in. Her voice dropped low and playful, in inflection she hadn't used with me in a long time. When I walked in, she jumped a little and said, "I was just talking to Shelby." I nodded. But Shelby's voice doesn't sound like a man's. It started driving me crazy. The silence. The pretending. The way our house had become two people living parallel lives, occasionally overlapping in the same room but never quite in sync. I'd lie awake at night, listening to her breathe, wondering where she really was when she said she was out late. I'd stare at her face and try to figure out what had changed. The softness in her expression was gone. Her smiles were smaller, rationed. Her words careful, like someone walking a tightrope. And here's the thing, I wanted it to be me. I wanted to believe that I'd done something wrong, that I was the reason for the distance, that I'd gotten too distracted with work or taken her for granted. Because if I was the problem, at least I could fix it. But I started realizing that nothing I did seemed to matter anymore. I could clean the house, surprise her with dinner, ask about her day, offer to rub her back. She didn't light up the way she used to. Her affection felt like a checkbox. Her kisses felt obligatory. And every time her phone buzzed, she'd light up like it was oxygen. But never for me. I remember sitting on the edge of the bed one morning, watching her sleep. Her hair was a mess, and she had that little crease between her eyebrows that only shows up when she's truly exhausted. I used to think it was beautiful, proof that she was human, that she needed me. But now it just looked like another thing I couldn't reach. When she woke up, I asked her, "Are you happy?" She blinked, rolled onto her back, and stared at the ceiling. "Why?" "Just wondering." She didn't answer. That was the day I realized how long I'd been invisible. How long I'd been showing up to a relationship that had quietly decided it didn't need me anymore. I started replaying the early signs. How distant she'd grown. How hard she tried to seem relaxed at brunch. The way she brushed off being caught off guard on Shelby's porch. And suddenly it all fit together. That wasn't an awkward moment. That was a crack in a carefully built wall. Madison was still smiling. Still saying all the right things. But behind that smile was something else, something calculated. I wasn't losing her. She was already gone. It happened on a Thursday. I remember that because I'd left work early after a morning full of back-to-back meetings. I'd gotten halfway home before realizing I'd left my wallet on my desk. But halfway back, traffic was already thick and I figured I could survive the night without it. I turned around again, irritated, tired, and without knowing it, about to walk into the moment that would break me. Madison had texted earlier that she planned on having a quiet night in. Going to make pasta and catch up on my shows, she'd said. She made it sound so casual, so routine. I almost didn't even text to say I was coming back. But I didn't want to startle her, so I did. No reply. That wasn't unusual. She didn't always check her phone right away, or so I told myself. I parked a little crooked in the driveway and didn't bother to fix it. The house was dark from the outside, the porch light off, no music playing, none of the signs of her usual quiet night in. Still, I assumed she was just upstairs, maybe with headphones in, maybe asleep early. But the moment I opened the door, I felt it. You know how people say the air changes? I used to think that was just metaphor. But no, something really does shift. The energy, the warmth, it vanishes. And in its place is a cold hum. Like the whole house is holding its breath. I walked in slowly, trying not to make a sound. I don't know why, maybe part of me already knew. As I passed through the hallway, a soft glow lit up from the kitchen. The kind that comes from one of those dimmed corner lights we always left on when we weren't quite ready to call it a night. I moved quietly, almost on instinct, footsteps landing as if I were intruding in someone else's home. And then I heard it. Laughter. Low, soft, and asterisk mate. Followed by a whisper. I turned the corner, and there they were. Madison and Max. He was sitting close beside her at the kitchen table, elbows touching. His head was angled down toward her, and she was leaned in, one hand resting lightly on his forearm. They weren't kissing. They didn't need to be. Everything about their posture screamed familiarity. Comfort. Possession. A private moment they thought no one would ever see. Max. The same Max she'd once described to me as just a guy from the gym. The one I'd met maybe twice, once at a barbecue where he shook my hand and offered some half-hearted small talk, and another time when he happened to be walking out of a store we were walking into. Just a guy, she had said. Barely knew him. She knew him. She knew him in a way I hadn't seen her know anyone in a long time. Neither of them noticed me. I didn't speak. I didn't move. I stood in the shadowed archway, heart pounding in my ears, watching the woman I married share a moment of quiet affection with someone else in the kitchen I built at the table we picked out together. He reached up and tucked a piece of hair behind her ear. She smiled, slow and soft, the same way she used to smile at me. And just like that, I snapped out of it. I stepped back quietly, walked out the front door, and sat in my car for what felt like forever. The street was still, my hands frozen on the steering wheel. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't feel anything at all except hollow. At some point, I pulled out my phone and opened the camera. Not to be cruel. Not for revenge. But because I knew that later I'd question myself. I'd try to downplay it. I'd try to convince myself that it didn't mean what I thought it meant. So I took a picture. One single image through the front window, blurry, dimly lit, but enough. Enough to remind me that this wasn't in my head. Enough to bury the doubt that had been gaslighting me for weeks. Then I drove away. I didn't go far. I parked a few blocks down and just sat there. I must have replayed the scene in my head 100 times. Her smile. His hand. The way they leaned into each other like it was the most natural thing in the world. I thought about the texts, the silence, the yoga classes that never happened. The way she lit up for her phone but never for me. It all clicked. Like a puzzle falling into place with one final piece. There wasn't going to be a confession. There wasn't going to be a confrontation where she broke down in guilt and begged forgiveness. This was a full betrayal, premeditated, established, practiced. I was the last to know. The next morning, she made coffee. She stood in the kitchen, back to me humming. The same space, the same woman, and yet completely different. When she turned around, she smiled. Morning, she said, like nothing had happened. I stared at her. At the woman who once knew every detail about my life. Who once texted me memes in the middle of meetings. Who cried on my shoulder the day her dad got sick. The woman who, 10 years ago, made me feel like the luckiest man alive. Now she stood across from me holding a mug and a lie. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My mouth was dry, my throat locked. If I opened it, I wasn't sure what would come out. She talked about her day, about how Shelby might need help moving some furniture next weekend and how she was thinking of starting a new workout routine. She asked if I wanted to go out to dinner sometime next week. We haven't done that in a while, she said. I nodded. And that nod felt like the biggest betrayal of all of myself. I knew the truth. I had proof. I had the image on my phone, the scene burned into my mind. But I didn't call her out. Not yet. Because something in me had shifted. Anger would come later. Grief would follow. But in that moment, I felt something more dangerous. I felt clarity. She wasn't going to tell me. She was going to keep lying. Keep gaslighting. Keep spinning a version of reality that I wasn't a part of. And that meant I had to stop playing along. I excused myself from the kitchen and went upstairs. Sat on the edge of the bed. Opened my phone. And looked at the photo again. Blurry. Slightly off-center. But real. Undeniable. I saved it to a folder marked insurance. Because from that moment on, I knew I couldn't trust a word out of her mouth. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't even ask her why. Because whatever reason she had, it didn't matter. All that mattered was what I did next. I didn't sleep much after that night. Even with Madison lying just a few feet away, turned to the wall, breathing in that steady rhythm that used to comfort me. Now it just made my skin crawl. I'd lie there staring at the ceiling, eyes wide open, mind running marathons. I didn't want revenge. That wasn't it. I wanted truth. I wanted power. For weeks, I'd been doubting myself. Gaslighting myself. Playing therapist and detective and doormat all at once just to keep the illusion of our marriage intact. But the illusion was dead and I had finally stopped resuscitating it. So I did what I always do when things fall apart. I made a plan. The next morning, before Madison even woke up, I opened my laptop. First thing I did was redirect my paycheck. We'd had a joint account for almost our entire marriage back when it meant something. But I didn't want her dipping into shared funds for weekend getaways with Max. Or yoga class. Or whatever story she thought up next. It took less than 5 minutes. Direct deposit rerouted to a private checking account she didn't know existed. A small thing, but it felt huge. Next, I started changing passwords. Not all at once, that would be too obvious. I started with the Apple ID, the one we used to share so we could sync calendars and photos. I changed the password, then locked down access to my personal cloud. It wasn't about hiding anything. It was about sealing the exits. Then I did something that surprised even me. I pulled out the old tablet. It was an iPad we barely used anymore, one that had been collecting dust in the bottom drawer of the office. I only remembered it because of an alert that had popped up on my phone the week before. Madison's iPad backed up successfully. I almost ignored it. Almost. But I didn't. When I opened the tablet, it took a few tries to get past the lock screen. But then suddenly I was in. Her iCloud was still connected. So were her messages. And her photos. My stomach dropped as I started scrolling. At first, it was harmless stuff, screensh asterisk TS of recipes, texts from Shelby, makeup tutorials. But then the names changed. Max Jim? M Blackheart. Maddie too. And the photos. I wasn't looking for anything graphic, I didn't want to see that. But I saw enough. Mirror selfies from hotel rooms that weren't ours. Late-night Snapchats with captions like, finally free tonight. Videos where she was laughing at jokes that I wasn't in on. Then came the calendar events. Meeting downtown, 1:30 p.m. Max lunch, private, labeled that way like a joke. Private. She had even color-coded it. There were too many to ignore. The yoga classes? Fake. The emergency work calls? Just cover for hotel drop-offs. I dug into her Uber history using the tablet, thank God it was still logged in. Weekday rides to hotels across town. Return trips from apartment buildings I didn't recognize. I took *TS of everything. The ride history. The messages. The locations. I stored them all on a flash drive. Labeled it work documents in case she ever stumbled across it. Paranoia? Maybe. But I wasn't going to let her rewrite this narrative when the truth finally came out. Because it would come out. On my terms. I started checking our security system next. We had a doorbell cam, one of those smart ones that logs motion, timestamps everything. I hadn't reviewed the footage in months. But once I did, the pattern jumped out. Wednesdays. Mid-afternoon. She always said she worked from the office on Wednesdays. But every week, the camera caught her arriving home around 2:15 p.m., holding takeout or looking like she'd just come from a salon. A few times, Max showed up 20 minutes later. I watched those clips in silence. The way she looked down before unlocking the door. The way she peeked over her shoulder. The way he stood too close when they entered together, never touching but always timed. Always careful. It was quiet. But it was all there. On Thursday, I took a personal day. Madison left around 8:30 a.m., claiming she had a full day at work followed by drinks with coworkers. Don't wait up, she said with a wink. I smiled and nodded. Then I waited 10 minutes before I logged into our shared laptop in the home office. She hadn't signed out of her email. Part of me expected it to be locked down, but no. It was all right there. Dozens of threads between her and Max. Some encrypted, some casual. Most using burner addresses or forwarding chains. But even the names were careless. Things like next Wednesday or lunch was everything. Some messages were just emojis. Others were photo attachments. And then one thread that sealed everything. Thanks for last night, she wrote. I needed that. Feels like the only place I can breathe lately. I stared at that one for a long time. Not because of what it said, but because of how normal it sounded. Like this was routine. Like this was life now. A second life. One that had been growing under my roof, unnoticed by me, nurtured while I folded her laundry and waited for her to come home smelling like someone else. I saved those too. Printed a few of the more subtle ones, no need for dramatics, just enough to confirm the lie when the time came. The rest I backed up to the flash drive. At one point, I stopped and looked around the room. There was a photo of us on the bookshelf taken in the first year of our marriage. We were on a hike, grinning in the sun, arms around each other like we knew the future would be kind. I walked over, pulled it from the frame, and slid the photo into a drawer. The frame I left empty. I needed the space. By Friday, I'd moved half of my money into a high-yield savings account in my name only. I'd also met with a lawyer someone a coworker had recommended. We sat in a sterile office downtown and I laid it all out. No emotion. Just facts. Receipts. Dates. He listened, barely blinking. You've done most of the hard work already, he said. All I need is a signed retainer and a date. I nodded. I'm not ready for the explosion, I said. Not yet. He smiled. When you are, you'll be prepared. And I was. That weekend, I barely spoke to Madison. We moved around each other like ghosts. She scrolled her phone on the couch while I read in the kitchen. She ordered takeout and didn't ask if I wanted anything. She watched a movie on her laptop with headphones in. I didn't ask what she was watching. On Sunday, she mentioned needing space next weekend for a girls' trip. I said, of course. Because by then, I wasn't trying to stop her anymore. I was letting her dig the hole deeper. I was giving her enough room to prove everything I already knew. And in the quiet, I made peace with the plan. I didn't expect the call from Shelby. It was 3 days after Madison told me about her so-called girls' trip, a vague weekend away with no firm destination, no itinerary, just a packed duffel and another lie waiting to be swallowed. By that point, I'd stopped challenging her stories. The more space I gave her to weave her fiction, the more she revealed without realizing it. But Shelby? That came out of nowhere. She texted me first. Hey, got a minute? I need to talk. Alone. Just reading that made my stomach tighten. I hadn't talked to Shelby much since brunch. We were friendly, sure, but not the kind of friends who text each other just to check in. Her reaching out now, especially with that tone, something was up. I responded with a simple call me. She did. Hey, she said, her voice already strained like she'd been rehearsing this moment and wasn't sure how to begin. I know this is a little random, but I need to clear something off my chest. I was silent for a second. Okay. It's about Madison. Of course it was. I've been sitting on this for a while, she said. And after what happened at brunch, I haven't been able to let it go. She paused like she was waiting for me to fill in the blanks. But I didn't. I just listened. I need to be honest, she continued, the words picking up speed now. That day at my place, I didn't ask you to step outside because I needed help with the porch. That much I already knew. I asked you to go out there so you'd see her. Madison. She told me earlier that morning she needed to meet someone real quick, just for 5 minutes. She said she'd step out around 11:30 and come back like nothing happened. I asked her who it was. She said it was just a friend. She wouldn't say more. I closed my eyes, already bracing for what came next. But something felt off, Shelby said. And when she walked out, I had a gut feeling. So I asked you to step outside. I knew there was a chance you'd still be there when she came out. I didn't want to set her up, but I guess I kind of did. She exhaled like the weight of what she was saying was finally hitting her. She looked panicked when she saw you, I said quietly. I know, Shelby replied. And afterward, she tried to play it off. Said she just needed air, that she misheard me calling her or something. But Ethan, I've known Madison for years. And lately, she's been different. Distracted. Conflicted. I kept thinking she'd come clean, but she never did. I felt a strange mixture of vindication and nausea. You knew about Max? I asked. I didn't know, no. But I suspected, she said. She mentioned him more than once. First just in passing, Max from the gym, or ran into Max again. Then she started talking about him like he was this constant presence. At first, I thought maybe she was just venting, maybe flirting a little. But then she said something a couple weeks ago. What? I asked. She said, sometimes I feel like I have 2 lives and I don't know which one is real anymore. That sentence hit me harder than I expected. She didn't say his name directly, Shelby added. But it was obvious. And you didn't think to tell me? I asked, trying to keep my voice even. There was a pause. I didn't know what to do, she said. You're both my friends. I thought maybe she'd wake up, maybe it would blow over. I thought if I confronted her too hard, she'd shut down or stop trusting me. I could hear the guilt in her voice. It wasn't fake. She wasn't calling to cover herself, she was unraveling too, just in a different way. But then brunch happened, she continued. And seeing your face when she came out, the way she turned right around, it just confirmed everything. And after that, I couldn't stop thinking about it. You didn't deserve that. No, I said. I didn't. She went quiet again, like she didn't know what else to say. I'm not calling to get involved, she said after a moment. I just thought you should know the full truth. I'm not proud of staying silent, but I'm not going to pretend anymore. I appreciated that. More than I expected to. Thank you for telling me, I said. If you ever need anything, she added, proof, a statement, whatever, you have my support. And I believed her. When the call ended, I sat there for a long time, holding the phone in my lap, replaying everything she had said. The air felt thick in the room, like the truth had finally arrived and was taking up space. It was strange how much clarity a single conversation could bring. Madison wasn't just distracted. She wasn't just unhappy. She was building something else. Another version of herself, a second life constructed out of excuses, detours, half-truths. And I'd been standing on the sidelines the whole time, watching her disappear into it. But now I had backup. Shelby might have waited too long, but she came through when it counted. And now, for the first time, I had someone who saw what I saw. Someone who would stand beside me when everything came crashing down. Because it would. I was done waiting. I didn't tell Madison about the call. That night, she came home buzzing from her client drinks, cheeks flushed, eyes bright. She smelled like some new perfume, spicy and sweet, like she'd been dipped in someone else's world. I sat at the dining table with my laptop open, pretending to be busy with work. She kissed me on the cheek like nothing was wrong. I didn't kiss her back. You okay? She asked. Yeah, I said. Just tired. She shrugged and wandered into the kitchen. Hummed while unpacking leftovers. I watched her move around, completely unaware of the ground shifting beneath her. Later, after she went to bed, I pulled out the flash drive. I added the new details. Created a folder called Testimony and dropped in a new document. Shelby's call, 10:42 a.m. Thursday. Then I opened a blank file and started writing a list. Separate bank account, white EV checkmark. Cloud backup locked, white EV checkmark. Ride history and camera footage, white EV checkmark. Lawyer consultation complete, white EV checkmark. Third-party confirmation, white EV checkmark. The last item sat alone. Final confrontation, TBD. But I knew the date was coming. And when it did, it wouldn't be in private.